All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're going to decode what modern agriculture is all about, but not by looking at some news article or a documentary. No, we're going straight to the source, the final exams for the students who will literally be growing our food in the future. And trust me, these are not your average high school tests. They reveal this incredible world of science and tech that you might never have expected.
So let's kick things off with a bit of a riddle. What do a geneticist, a mechanical engineer, and an economist all have in common? I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really bad joke, right? But the answer is at the very heart of how we feed the entire planet. Stick with me, because it's probably not what you're thinking.
So the answer? They're all the same person, a modern farmer. Seriously. All those skills are rolled into one in agricultural science. Just look here. On the left, you've got questions about plant genetics from a breeding exam. And on the right, questions about tractor engines from a farm machinery final. This isn't an either-or thing. This is modern agriculture. So here's our game plan. We're going to build the expertise of an agricultural scientist, literally from the ground up. We'll start by seeing why there's so much more than a farmer. Then we'll dig into the life in the soil, figure out how to design the perfect crop, see what powers the modern harvest, try to balance the budget with the ecosystem, and then finally, ask what the next green revolution is going to look like. Okay, first up, more than a farmer. We're going to unpack what these exams really tell us about the wild range of skills you need to have in agriculture today, because it's really evolved into this amazing mix of deep, deep science, super high-tech engineering, and some pretty complex business strategy. Yeah, so if you're picturing someone with a pitchfork and overalls, it's time for a serious update. These exams prove, without a doubt, that modern agriculture is a highly technical, multidisciplinary science. It demands expertise in fields you'd think have nothing to do with each other, but are all absolutely critical to feeding the world. All right, let's get our hands dirty. We're starting where all food begins, the soil. And we're about to dive into this invisible world right under our feet. Because this isn't just dirt, you know? It's a living, breathing, incredibly complex ecosystem that these students have to understand, right down to the microscopic level. So check this out. This question is pulled straight from a microbiology exam. Students have to know all about prokaryotic cells. And you might be asking, why? Well, it's because these tiny, single-celled organisms, like bacteria, are basically the engines of the soil. They're the ones breaking everything down and making nutrients available for new plants. Without them, fields would just be barren. And it gets even cooler. On that same exam, there's a question about mycorrhiza. This is just a perfect example of how interconnected life in the soil is. It's this partnership, this symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a plant's roots. The fungus basically acts like a massive root extension, grabbing water and nutrients for the plant. And in return, the plant feeds the fungus sugars. It's this beautiful cooperation, and you have to understand it to keep your soil productive. And here's where it all comes together. This question asks students to lay out the entire nitrogen cycle. See all those tiny microbes we were just talking about? They are the absolute stars of this show. They're taking nitrogen from the air, which plants can't use, and converting it into a form they can. It's a gigantic, planet-wide process. And if you don't get it, you can't be a successful farmer. Simple as that. Okay, so we've got the soil covered. Let's move up to the plants themselves. Now we're talking about designing the perfect crop. This is where genetics and biotechnology really enter the picture, and it's just a fascinating peek behind the curtain at the science of our food. I mean, the plant breeding exam gets right to it. It asks students to define plant biotechnology and explain how it's used to make crops better. This is the modern farmer's toolkit. It's all about using science to create plants that can fight off diseases, survive a drought, or even be packed with more nutrients. And here's another perfect example. Students have to know the difference between heterosis and inbreeding depression. Think of them as two sides of the same genetic coin. Heterosis is that magic that happens when you cross two different plants and get an offspring that's stronger and better than both parents. Inbreeding depression, well, that's the opposite. It's what happens when you keep breeding the same plants and they get weaker over time. Understanding this is absolutely fundamental to developing the best seeds.
And this stuff isn't just theory, you know? The crop production exam asks about golden rice. This is a huge, real-world example of using genetic engineering to solve a massive health problem. Golden rice was created to produce beta-carotene, which our bodies turn into vitamin A. It's a direct way to fight vitamin A deficiency, which is a devastating problem in many parts of the world. So students have to know not just the science, but how it's actually being used to make a difference.
So you've got your perfect soil. You've designed the perfect plant. But now, how do you manage all of this on a massive scale? Well, this is where the engineers come in. We are talking about some serious farm machinery, power, and precision. A quick look at the farm machinery exam shows that these students pretty much need to be expert mechanics. They're getting grilled on the deep inner workings of an engine, from the flywheel to the carburetor. And why? Because a modern farm can be a multi-million-dollar business that runs on this heavy machinery. If a machine breaks down during harvest, you can't just wait around for a mechanic. Every minute you lose is money down the drain. And we're not just talking about the engine. This question asks students to analyze a combine harvester. These things are unbelievable machines. They can cost hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. So a farmer has to be able to look at one and evaluate its performance, its efficiency, and decide if it's the right piece of equipment for their specific needs. It's a massive investment, and you absolutely have to get it right.
Okay, so we've seen the biology, we've seen the engineering. Now we get to the really tough part, balancing the checkbook with the health of the planet. This is where a farmer has to wear two hats at once, economist and ecologist.
Let's talk about the money first. The agricultural finance exam goes everywhere from microfinance all the way up to the World Bank. I mean, students are learning about SWOT analyses, international monetary policy. This just goes to show you that a modern farm is not just a patch of land. It's a complex business deeply tied into the global economy. But then, at the exact same time, the environmental studies exam is hitting them with questions on ozone depletion, land degradation, and pollution. And this is the great challenge of modern agriculture. How do you make a profit while also protecting the land, the air, and the water for the next generation? It is an incredibly tough balancing act.
So how do you possibly find that balance? The answer is data, a ton of data. Take this question from the statistics exam. It's asking about the difference between sampling and doing a full census. And that's a crucial distinction. Do you test the soil in a few representative spots, that's sampling, or in every single square foot? Your choice has huge implications for cost, time, and accuracy. Making the right data-driven decision here is the key to being both profitable and sustainable.
And all of this brings us to our final section. Why all this incredibly intense and varied training? Because these students, they're the ones who are going to have to lead the next agricultural revolution, and it's a challenge that is going to shape the entire future of our planet. I absolutely love this question from the dairy science exam. It's about India's white revolution. This was a gigantic program back in the 70s that completely transformed India's dairy industry. It took the country from being milk deficient to being the world's largest milk producer. By studying huge successes like this, students are learning how to think on that kind of massive scale, which is exactly what we need to tackle today's challenges. And you can see those challenges all over these exams. Students are being tested on the causes of landslides, the importance of biodiversity, how to manage pests without nasty chemicals, how to harvest rainwater in a changing climate, and even how to make sure our food supply is safe. They are being trained for a future that's going to look very, very different from the past. And that just leaves us with one final and I think really important question. We've seen the unbelievable depth and breadth of these exams, from microbiology to mechanical engineering, from global finance to climate science. So if this is the written test, what is the real-world test going to look like for the generation that has to figure out how to feed 8, 9, or maybe even 10 million people on a changing planet? That, right there, is the test that truly matters.